think I could probably go 125. Seeing as... Oh, one thing I might do. That's looking pretty good. Oh no, dropping frames. No. No sooner do I say it. Hey Herringbone, hi. Welcome. I've gotten rid of my introductions, like my little sort of splash screen, ever since Windows decided that it didn't like me logging in. All my OBS settings have just sort of vanished. So I don't have that splash screen anymore where I can sort of gather my thoughts for the first minute. So there's just this, just me sitting here with my phone slightly out of camera. How are you doing? Hope you've been well. Hope you've been well. We are 1 minute in. Let's just sort of chew the fat for a couple of minutes. We'll warm this stream up and then we'll dive right in. So it's been a short while since I've edited someone's work. I think the last one I did was Sean's story, which would have been a couple of weeks ago, right? Yeah. I've just been playing Hollow Knight since then. It's not too bad here in Sydney. What's the temperature like? It doesn't feel too warm. 23 degrees? Right now, and it's gonna get 26 today, so sort of high 20s. What's going on down in Melbourne? Are you guys having a heat wave or something? Because you mentioned yesterday that you were sweltering under some pretty oppressive conditions. Don't know what's going on with Melbourne. $36. Wow. Okay, that's pretty intense. No, thank you. You can keep your 36. I do miss those temperatures though. Although we're out the other end of summer, so a few days of high mid-30s. Wow. Yikes. It's weird, like the end of summer sometimes just throws stuff at you. A lot of those hot conditions tend to come out of nowhere, and in some sense you're sort of prepared psychologically to not have that because you've got autumn coming in. But like what I was saying before, without contradicting myself, yeah, but I think there's still a bit of bite left to summer. Good, well the stream quality is stable, which is nice. I think with the improved resolution, 125 should be pretty good. In which case, we can start pretty soon. Yeah, why don't we start right now? Why not? No time like the present. Yep, good. Okay, so this story's by Maiz, who sent me a couple of messages over Discord. I was like, hey, can you edit this story? Sure can, I said, with some more stuff in between. So this is by Maiz. There we go. And this is my copy of the document. So it's actually quite a short one. It is like 1,200 words. So we'll get through this fairly quickly, and then we can get on with our Sundays and or respective Saturdays, depending on where we are. That's okay. I think we'll probably be done a bit after 10. This won't take too long, I think. But that's okay. It's nice to have like a sort of short, sweet edit. And I haven't read too much into this. I read the first page just to sort of get a sense of what the story was and where we're going. And I have no background to this either, which is nice. I like going in without too much knowledge of what's going to happen or even what genre we're playing with. So yeah, let's start. I'm going to pronounce this Audea. So we've got Audea's seal. Chapter 1. Magically mesmerizing, the brass band spun in slow motion, falling. Azel Fenn watched it closely with his hazel-coloured eyes, entranced as the image carved into the ring disappeared and reappeared once again. In his mind, the two creatures were playing out an old legend which had been forgotten with the passage of time. The boy snapped back to reality when finally the ring landed with a quiet thump on the palm of his father's large hand. Excuse me. They were in Azel's bedroom, lit dimly by candles all around. It was rather plain for a room owned by a young boy. There were no toys, and the only furniture was Azel's bed, a dresser, and a small bookshelf full of old storybooks. Not even a single piece of clothing could be seen on the floor. Azel was careful not to disappoint Garrick, who took great care in teaching his son the importance of being neat and tidy. Garrick held the ring up now, between two of his fingers. Azel stared with curiosity. "Have I ever told you the story of Audea's seal?" Garrick asked. This was one of their bedtime rituals, which Azel was quite fond of. He loved hearing the stories of his father's adventures, and about old myths and legends. "No, Papa," was Azel's response. Garrick stared at his son with eyes that were full of experience, eyes that longed to share these stories with others, and eyes that only a seasoned adventurer might have. When this world we live in was still new and demons were allowed to roam freely, they caused all sorts of mischief, from minor pranks to situations that would actually put the lives of others in danger. As the chaos grew in Perrin, so did the need to find a hero with the skills needed to vanquish those vile creatures. Azel listened intently to his father's every word, as Garrick told the story into the latter hours of the night, and when the moon had finally reached its climax, Azel's eyes closed. Quietly and carefully, the father tucked his son under the covers, and proceeded to blow out each candle in methodical succession, ending their ritual. Before the flame of the last candle was snuffed out, Garrick pulled a black and red bandana from a pocket in his shirt. He folded it and placed it neatly on the bookshelf, before extinguishing the last flame and exiting through the door. He left it open just enough to let a little light shine through. Okay, that's the first chunk of the story, which is about 300 words? Yep, so that's about a bit under half, 400 words. Let's take this first chunk and we'll go through and see what we can see. So, my first impression of the story is that there's when we talk about showing versus telling detail, there's often this sort of assumption that comes underneath that showing you detail is always better because it gives you a bit more, I suppose, an emotional connection with what it is that you're reading. Oftentimes it's kind of combined with this narration style where the narrator just kind of gets out of the way, and when you pair those two together, when you have a narrator who doesn't have much sense of the story world but is just there to vomit words at you, it's better to show detail then, because the voice of the narrator is characterless, but what they're telling you is storyful. This will make sense in a second. It may sound like word waffle, but what I'm getting at is this. In a story like this, your first temptation as an editor or as a writer reading this might be to think, oh, it's just full of telling detail. Let's get rid of all that. But I don't think that's necessarily the strongest thing to suggest for this story. In these kinds of I suppose, quite fundamental fantasies, it sometimes can be good to give your narrator a bit of like a grandfatherly, not godlike, but a sense that they have total control of the story, and telling detail through that voice is actually quite an interesting thing to do. You get a sense that the narrator is engaged with the story as much as the reader is. And I don't think it necessarily follows that you need to strip away all the telling from the story. So there are points here where I actually really like it, like the tell detail. So here, for instance, Garrick stared at his son with eyes that were full of experience, eyes that longed to share these stories with others, and eyes that only a seasoned adventurer might have. So, in other circumstances, you'd be tempted to go, oh, you know, this detail can be shown. You could show that he has a wizened face, like a missing eye, or like a cloudy eye, or blah, 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 blah. Like, you can do all sorts of micro detail where you can show this, but sometimes it's just nice to have stuff thrown at you. And I think that's especially the case in fantasy stories, where your reader, having read lots of other fantasy stories, is just kind of used to it. So, for places like, well, for instances like here, telling detail like this can actually be a strong way to convey some of the story detail. You don't necessarily need to show often, well, not often, sometimes telling detail especially, if I can spell especially properly, not specially, especially when so my suggestion so with all that being said, what I was just typing there at the end was that for every time where stuff like this works, there are other times where showing the detail might be a bit better. Because if you're balancing on the one hand your narrator's voice and the way that they're speaking through the story, how that impacts how you're writing it, the other side of the equation is that you've got to think of how the images in the story are being constructed in a mental sense. So you've got narrative flow and you've got the world building aspect. So other times I don't want detail told to me, I want to be shown the detail. This is one of those times down here where I really like the narrator coming in and going, bloop, here's the detail. Other times I want to experience it firsthand, and that will be, they were in Azel's bedroom, lit dimly by candles all around. So this is a really good example of, so here, I want the detail shown to me because I, as a reader, need to have a good mental picture of where my characters are, where the characters, well, they're my characters now, in the sense that I'm imagining them, but I need a good mental picture of where the characters are in the world. They need to be grounded in a picture. This is a good paragraph where you can just do that really, really successfully. So, for instance, I'll just type something here around his bedroom, or a might be all around the room. I'm a bit rusty. What am I trying to convey? I was right the first time. Except it can't be dry and dusty because he keeps it put neat and tidy. I'm... Asa was careful not to disappoint Garrick, took great care in teaching the ones being neat and tidy. So for example, what I've done here is not I know I always say this when I edit, but it's good to reiterate this point because, well, it's good to reiterate this point. When I word vomit stuff like this down, it's not so much that I want to replace everything that was above it with this. I don't take this as like the golden standard, but what I hopefully wanted to do was try and convey visually what I was talking about in terms of trying to ground the setting. You can still have lots of implication, you can still have direction. like things like this. But what this does is maybe it paints the picture a bit more. It allows the reader to sit down and go, I can sort of feel myself a bit there. A ring of candles hug the walls, spitting their warm light over. All over. Shadows danced across Garrick's face, running across the lines of age, telling stories of their paths. Azel felt a sense of wonder rise tall in his heart, knowing that many stories were yet uncovered. This was his favourite time of day, when the two could share such adventures. Even in a room where tidiness and order ran, no toys scattered, no papers left out, no book misplaced upon the shelves. There could be a measure of chaos in the creation of new worlds by words. What this does is it gives similar implications, but maybe it helps the reader to frame everything a bit more in an actual place. And the only thing that I've really done is just reconfigured some of the sentences. A ring of candles hug the walls, spinning their warm light all over. So tucked up in bed. Here's a description of the room. Here's a description of Garrick's face, so we get a sense of what he looks like. We kind of know where they are. You could also play with senses. Describe the quiet of the room, the smell, etc. Like there's lots of things you can do here, but so I'll just type a comment here. The point. It's to demonstrate how you can turn some of the tell descriptions into more fleshed out version so that the reader can place themselves alongside the characters. Magically mesmerizing, the brass band spun in slow motion. This is something that I want to deal with as well. I quite like this. It's not grammatically right, but that's why I like it. Magically mesmerizing, the brass band spun in slow motion, falling. The brass band spun in slow motion, falling. It's a bit of a word salad, but I quite like it. Another editor might say, you can't start a story with an ly adverb. You can't break the it's sort of like breaking the tense when you go magically mesmerizing. But I really like it. I say keep it. The brass band spun in slow motion. It's difficult to say out loud. It's okay in the head. Yes. So yeah, so Herringbone says magical mesmerizing. Which is probably more grammatically correct. Camera person. But to be honest, I quite like magically. I know I shouldn't be suggesting keeping it, but I quite like it. But it's not strictly true. Anyway, Azel then watched it closely with his nope. So one of the big no-nos, and I don't want to do this where I'm like, there are the golden rules that you can't talk about, but there are golden rules that you can't break. One of them is you never describe characters right off the bat as having specifically colored eyes. It's I think it used to be a trope, and then it became a sign of amateurish writing. It's one of those things that if you put in your story, you give people an excuse to not take you and your words not seriously. It's an opportunity for them to outright dismiss your story, so it's just better to get rid of it. Because you got to ask yourself, is it super important for the reader at this point in time, 2 sentences into the story, to know that Azelfen has hazel eyes? Like, is that the most pertinent thing about Azel that we need to know? Yeah, it's funny. Like when I was a teenager, this rule was pretty heavily drilled into my head, because you'd see it in other students writing, and you'd think, oh, you can see it over and over and over again. So I don't know. I don't mind the version either, as there's something nice about the mouthfeel of magically mesmerizing. Why is nobody talking about the mouthfeel of words? We should start a discussion about, just get a conversation going about the mouthfeel of words. Angular, pointy, with afternotes of fruit and hazelnut. So speaking of hazelnut, we can get rid of hazel-colored eyes. So have a look at what happens when you cut this sentence down. Azelfen watched, whoops, got rid of a tense, watched entranced as the image carved into the ring disappeared and reappeared once again. This has a better flow to it as well. Once we get rid of this extraneous information, not only does this little highlighted part here overwhelm the cadence of the sentence, but commits a bit of a cardinal sin of writing. When you get rid of it, Azelfen watched entranced as the image carved into the ring disappeared and reappeared once again. That's a good sentence. That's a sentence that has a fluid motion to it. And then if you need to tell us that that Azelfen's eyes are hazel, if it's a really important detail, then dress it in or sprinkle it in a bit later. You're saying Jess, but I'm all about it. There is something to be said about how words come out in a sentence. Yeah, like for sure. I totally agree with you. I don't think anyone's ever described it as the mouthfeel of words, but maybe we can make this a thing. I was thinking about like a couple of ContraPoints videos, but she doesn't get to own mouthfeel. It's not her domain. If we want to appropriate the mouthfeel idea into words, then we can do that. In his mind, the two creatures were playing out an old legend which had been forgotten with the passage of time. So one thing I really like about this opener is that I can sort of see it in like a movie camera sense. Like we start on the outside of the ring, it's spinning, and then we're in the ring, and then we see this thing. The trouble is that in his mind, the two creatures. Now, we don't have prior knowledge of the creatures, so we can't refer to them as the two creatures. Easy fix, you just get rid of the, and also you can get rid of in his mind. And replace it with something stronger. So for instance, he saw we need a sentence where we understand what we're seeing. So I've written, he saw within two creatures dancing, two powerful things that did stuff. The one thing about this that I need as a reader is more of it. I like that you've set it up, and I like where it's going, but it starts and it ends, and it's so quick. And there's a glimpse here of something really nice, and in some ways that's actually kind of cool because it reflects a ring being tossed up and caught. But we need a little more about what we're seeing so that we can understand it. The boy snapped back to reality when finally the ring landed with a quiet thump. Oh, look at that. There's a weird space between the P and the M, but that's not actually a space. It's just a weird sort of lettering thing. Of his father's large hand. On the palm of his father's large hand. It's a bit wordy. And slightly redundant. The ring landed with a quiet thump on the palm of his father's large hand. Oh, it's not the end of the world. The reason I quite like it is because the word father is at the tail end of a sentence. Oh, have I been writing it all? Oh, I'd love to say yes. I'm in a real slump right now. I've been in a slump for ages. It feels like it's been ages. I sort of feel like the stories that I've been writing for stream have been like my B grade stuff, and in my mind I'm like, oh, I'll keep the A grade stuff for off stream and maybe drip in a bit later. But I don't know why I had that attitude, or if it was actually correct, because I don't really have that much of the A grade stuff, having had it written. So I don't know really where I'm at the moment. In my defense, I'm a couple of months away from finishing a PhD thesis, so I should probably be focusing on that right now. But I've got ideas brewing around, which is important, so as long as I'm thinking about ideas, then I guess that's okay, but I miss it. I want to get back into writing, I really do. Just for my own mental health as well. I find that I'm happier when I write. How about you, Harry? How are your writing adventures going? So Gary curled the ring up now, between two fingers. Nope, stared is a word. Don't know what was going on there with Google. Hazel stared with curiosity. Have I ever told you the story of Audea's seal? Garrick asked. Although it's succinct, I'd replace this with... I don't need to comment, I'll just do. Really simple fix. I like how succinct that was, but I didn't like the fact that it was just curiosity. Hazel stared with wide eyes. It's exactly the same thing, except you tell us... No, you show us a detail, and I now have an image associated with it. I feel like the story has bloomed just a tiny little bit as I've experienced it. Hazel stared with curiosity is just like, it's a flat image. It's a single transient, or non-transient event. It's just, there it is. But when I read Hazel stared with wide eyes, I can imagine him actually like becoming wide-eyed, even though you haven't said it. So I mean, that's the best demonstration of showing versus telling anyone could ever do, because it's replacing one word with two and making it into a 5-word sentence. Like this right here is the golden key of showing versus telling. But in such a simple example, I hope you can get why I'm suggesting that. Knowing for me, but I've been plotting out the second. Ooh, nice. Oh, I remember this story. This is the one about the member of the German, the Nazi party, who's on the anthropological expedition. Is that right? Have I ever told you the story of Audea's seal? Garrick asked. Boop, get rid of this. Okay. Originally this was Gary curled the ring up now between two of his fingers. Azel stared with curiosity. Have I ever told you the story of Audea's seal? Garrick asked. Now it's Gary curled the ring up. Gary curled the ring up now between two fingers. Azel stared with wide eyes. His father leaned in closer, closer, bringing forward the ring so it caught every colour of flame and shadow in its body. With a voice of ember, Garrick murmured, "Have I ever told you the story of this?" Why I've word waffled here is because this little paragraph is quite important in that the reader's attention is focused on this, but because of the previous way it was written, it was too short, and we didn't get much of a sense of it being an event. Just by adding a bit of unnecessary detail, like it's quite nice detail, if I do say so myself, the point of it is that it's padding to push the pace out. Now, when you read this in your mind, you work into it, you become excited in a way. You want to experience the story as it comes out. You want to be there as Garrick's telling you these things, whereas before it was just like, this happened, hey, have I ever told you this? Garrick asked. Now we've got like a voice to the question. The question ends the paragraph. It's a pointed thing. We've got an image to play with. I repeated the use of fire and flame and shadow everywhere, so it's kind of dark and mysterious. But notice that I haven't actually really done all that much. I changed one word here, I added a sentence, I told you how his voice sounded. Like, there are tiny little things that you can do to just elevate the quality of writing. I think some people don't even realize this. A lot of people think that the quality in the story comes from the intricacy of the plot, but that's really not the case. Like, there are millions of writers around the world, we're all writing stories, they're all kind of similar. We need to make our stories impactful rather than unique or contrived or heavily intricate. Like, if you can do that and make an impactful story, then power to you, but if we're writing genre fiction, you're not going to be reinventing the wheel, and so it should be the aim of every writer to look at their writing and to go, okay, well, here's the plot. This is what the story is. Now, how can I write it in such a way that makes it living, makes it breathing, makes it its own entity and its own creation? The answer is that you word waffle. you vomit some words up. But that's my biggest piece of advice ever, I think, is if you're worried that your story is a bit thin, don't make it more complicated, make it more robust. Go through with the elements that you already have and have a think about if they're as strong as they could be. Oftentimes, you don't even need to change all that much, you just need to sprinkle in a bit more detail, and it will come alive. Yeah. Oh, I was looking for a witch. That's cool. Oh, neat. I thought he was on a mountaintop somewhere looking at some cave paintings. But that may have been like a previous version that you're talking about. I think a good thing about the cinematic way the story is written is that Maiz can use the reader's rolling mental imagery to inject pace. As in this bit, the narrator almost leans into the reader's ear, which builds up anticipation about the story to come. That's exactly what I was going for. When I read through this the first time, I agree completely with Herring. There was this, like, a cinematic way in which the story is told. It's written in such a way that I can picture it as a movie, which is really good because it means that you can use movie techniques in a writing sense, and your reader will be able to really have a clear sense of how it looks in their head. So little things like this is a movie technique. It's how pace and character are developed in a visual sense, and you just translate that to words and the same effect takes place. So that ties in really well with what I was saying before, like the plots here. It's just if you fiddle with the technique a bit, you go from here to here in the space of like 10 minutes, just by not even changing the plot, but just about thinking about how it's presented to you. Blah. Slap my microphone on the way. Alrighty, just check OBS. Good. This was one of their bedtime rituals, which Asia was quite fond of. So by this point of the story, we've already established that he loved hearing of stories of his father's adventures about old myths and legends. What I do is I keep this. Yeah, it tells you the detail, but uh, what I do is I get Azel to shake his head. You can even do that. Azel shook his head from side to side, slow as always. He loved hearing stories of his father's adventures and about old myths and legends. This does tell you the detail, but if you want to keep that and give the narrator a bit more of a presence in the story, then you can put in a sentence like this before it, where you actually show the same thing. Like, these two things are basically redundant, but what this does is it allows the narrator to voice their opinion of the story, and then the reader goes, oh, okay, well, the narrator is kind of useful for picking up little bits and pieces, I guess. Oh. Oh, that's right. That's such a cool idea. Like, just the almost comical absurdity of this. This is in reference to Herringbone's idea, but underlying that is almost this like sincere belief that that was what they wanted to do. Like, how do you like it's such a fantastic idea for a story, but you're tempted as a reader to go, oh, that's too absurd, you know, that'd never happen. But you can kind of see it happening too, and that weird mixture of having it being really comic but really serious in another way. Like, that's story juice right there. You can make a really fantastic story with that. I'll take 10 copies, please. Garrick stared at his son with eyes that were full of experience, eyes that longed to share these stories with others, and eyes that only a seasoned adventurer might have. So again, this leans into the narrator a lot, and I like this, so I want you to keep it. When this world we live in was... so I'd add... sorry if that's a bit lazy, but like I'd write it out myself, but I think you sort of get the gist of what I want. Add a sentence here about Garrick doing something like ruffling his son's hair before staring off into the shadows and saying, when this world we live in was still new. You want to lean into this. This is a bit of exposition. An expedition of exposition. You know, it's just like a piece of heavy story dialogue that comes from a character, so you want to lean into it. When this world we live in was still new and demons were allowed to roam freely, they caused all sorts of mischief. Full stop. From minor pranks to situations that would actually put the lives of others in danger. The reason why I want you to cut this is because that's fairly big already. This makes it like a whew, that's a long sentence to say for someone to say out loud. When this world we live in was still new and demons were allowed to roam freely, they caused all sorts of mischief, from minor pranks to situations that would actually put lives. Like, I'm struggling to say it right now. So I think cut it up. Like it works better written, works better orally. So all you can do although. Although some chose the path of simple pranks, there were those wicked spirits who sought to put the lives of others in danger. So we got 1, 2. Again, I wanted to suggest that to cut the pace, to make each sentence a bit taller rather than having it thin. The longer your sentence is, the longer it sags, and if you have saggy writing, your readers will just be like, okay, more and more and more detail. Shorter sentences are usually better. Oh, Sayaka here. Hang on a second, you can't pop into a stream and say hi to yourself. What is this? Let me go back and read chat. Hang on. It's about living something that isn't logical as opposed to the answers. Yeah. Ah, that's also very clever. The hypothermia aspect. I'm not wearing his demon's wear. It's the first thing you hear from his. Right. So Herring's point here about mischief, simple, yeah. So I think Herring's point here is kind of addressed maybe if you split it up by saying, look, some are just dicks, but others are more dickish. That helps to establish the split nature of them as well. Things are always better orally. Oh dear. It was orally. That's what I was going for. This word. Is that even how you spell orally? Yes. There. As Chaos Guru and Perrin, I like that you didn't get the narrator to tell us what the land was called in the Great Land of Perrin, like Garrick just does it for us, which is nice. As the Chaos Guru and Perrin, so did we need to find a hero with the skills needed to vanquish those vile creatures. I think it's vile. This vile is like a file. A file? How do you pronounce that? Like a little glass contraption that holds chemicals, but you pronounce it weirdly.
Vial.
Like that. If you could hear that, I don't know if you could. Let me check. Hang on.
Vial.
I think it's coming through my speakers. So it's vile. I always thought it was file. Why? Because the alternate spelling of it is that. So vile. I don't know why we pronounce that.
File.
Oh, it can be pronounced file with an F. Vili. Yeah, I'll take that. Vili. Good morning, TTLACC. Yeah, this is a weird word. It's spelt 2 different ways, pronounced 2 different ways, and it means exactly the same thing. Why is our language stupid? I don't know. Regardless, this is the vile you want. The horrible. Per-il. So did the need to find a hero of skills needed. Careful with the repetition of need. As the chaos grew in Perrin, so too did the need. I'm gonna put so too. So too did the need to find a hero with the skills. Who possessed the skills? The mad skills. Needing to vanquish those vile creatures. There's a very funny moment in the Aragon movie where right, where Brom is training Boy, and Brom says you are not ready, and the boy goes, I've got skills, and that was a very funny moment for teenage me. So yeah, so you need the mad skills. As the chaos grew in Perrin, so too did we need to find a hero who possessed the skills needed, the skills to vanquish. So you can just get rid of needed. The skills to vanquish those vile creatures. Great. Azel listened intently to his father's every word as Garrick told the story into the latter hours. Is it later or latter? Later. Or late hours. You know what? Let's just make it late. Let's just make it late. So I don't have to do mental gymnastics to figure out if it's latter or if it's later hours. No, now I'm curious. Okay, latter versus later. Use later when referring to time. Use latter when referring to the second, like the second in the list, or the last in the list, like the latter of something. So you can put late or later, and I'm not going to lose any sleep. Into the later hours of the night, and when the moon had finally reached its climax, Azel's eyes closed. If you're gonna have a moon climaxing, if you're going to have a moon in your sink, we need a window. If you're going to put a moon in your scene, and it reaches a climax on its climb, how does the moon travel through the night sky? It's not on a path like the sun. Anyway, if it's like reaching its full potential or something, that's what we're after. We need a window in this room for this to work. Otherwise, it's just a piece of info that the narrator knows, but doesn't fit with the scene. If you want to, I can see the chat going here with my peripheral vision. I'll own up in a second. Hang on. If you need a scene specific passage or time marker, why not use the wax level on the candles? Like when the candles had all but burned down to their burned low, for instance, when the moon had finally reached its climax. Gosh. Alright, good to see you, Herringbone. That was a good point to leave, I think. Yay, it's good to be back to editing. Thank you for being patient with me while I scrounged around for a story. Actually, I should thank Maiz for that. Thank you, Maiz, for sending this one in. We'll catch you later. I think zenith is the appropriate word, isn't it? Yeah. Or is it cresting? Zenith versus crest. What's the difference? Thank you, Google, for making my life easier. I'd never seen this site before. It's called Wikidiff. Zenith is an astronomical term used to point in the celestial sphere opposite the nadir, which is the trough equivalent of a zenith. It's old. The highest point or state. Acme, apogee, culmination, pinnacle, crest. Yeah, so it's got like a sort of astronomical vibe to it, doesn't it? Yeah. Hello Esplad Sheila, how are you doing? Welcome to the stream. We are editing one of my viewers' stories. This is by Maiz, and it's called Audea's Seal. So we are... how many words are we through it? Just under 400, I think. And this is a... oh no, 600 with my words typed in. But this is a fairly short story, this one. Or at least a short excerpt. So what we do on the stream is we get people to send in their work, I read it out a bit, and then make suggestions and changes and edits. Line by line, paragraph by paragraph. So yeah, welcome. Good to meet you. So, quietly and carefully, the proud father tucked his son under the covers and proceeded to blow out each candle in methodical succession, ending their ritual. Before the flame of the last candle was snuffed out, Gary pulled a black and red bandana from a pocket in his shirt. He folded it and placed it neatly on the bookshelf before extinguishing the last flame. I'm gonna put this instead. Exiting through the door is a bit of a... it's like one of those things that you don't need to mention in a story. It's just kind of implied that it's going to be happening, unless you say he's and exited. But I think you can make that a bit more interesting by saying leaving the boy to his slumber, which implies exiting and refocuses the paragraph back on the boy. He left it just open enough to let a little light shine through. Now, we're not sure why this happens. Maybe add a little something here to mark the significance. We don't need to know its full backstory. That can come a bit later. But I want just a little bit more. Also, I'm not making things up. Look, there's a huge gap between the M and the next character. Like, it looks like it's a space, but it's not. It's just the text gap after the M. How strange. Is it like a zoom thing? Yeah, it might be a zoom thing. Cool. Only other thing I'd suggest here is usually I'd quite like the fact that it sounds kind of grandfatherly, like the narrator of the story is crafting a bit of a gentle piece. Quietly and carefully, the proud father tucked his son under the covers and proceeded to blow out each candle. Usually you'd want to get rid of the ly adverbs. Just because in modern writing everyone hates them, but to be honest, I think they fit really well here. And if it fits well, and if it adds to the story, then keep it. Oh, thank you, Sheila. Yeah, I think Maiz has done, in the first like 400 words, like quite a decent job of crafting with the front end of something that I'd like to sort of investigate more of. Like when I read through this, just give me an idea. Sorry, does flame have a space between it? It looks like flame. Good question. Let me check that first. No, it doesn't. That's weird. Yeah, check that out. This is the same thing with the item. Yeah. Weird, right? Look, the gap between the M and the E. That's so strange. Yeah, but I'm glad someone else noticed it. It wasn't just me. The one thing that I can suggest here at the end, here, to finish this off, I'd actually suggest, I'd suggest reworking some of the detail of the ring vision back into the closing section. That was the most one of the most interesting things to happen, but it kind of just vanished. The way that this opener works is that there's this sort of vision within the ring that Garrick is flipping between his thumb and forefinger, I guess, and he catches it, and then he tells his son this bedtime story about the demons, which is like a small snippet, and it's obvious that they've done this quite a bit before. Then he gets up and leaves, but it's just sort of, at the risk of having this sound kind of lame, bringing it full circle, to have the ring at the start and to have the ring at the end, to have that kind of magic implied at the end, I suppose. Like here, the red and black bandana is a new piece of information, and I'd sort of want Garrick to maybe instead new info here. Would it be better for him to interact with the magic ring once more? And talking or typing is when I'm typing, this is me, and talking. Your typing is heard over your voice. I want to work on typing quieter. I want to work on typing quieter. This is a keyboard that I'm using, and it's a mechanical keyboard. Unfortunately, there's no such thing as quiet typing with a mechanical keyboard. Also, my microphone, which is here, is right next to it. So part of my stream, I think, is unfortunately putting up with my keyboard sounds. I think they're lovely and soothing. Clack, 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 clack. So, yeah. Let's read on. Both Garrick and Azel were up before dawn, when the stars were still visible in the slowly brightening sky. A crisp autumn breeze blew through the trees, making their shadows dance, and in the distance was the flapping of an owl's wings as it found a nearby perch. "Look, Papa," Azel called out for his father. He was pointing at a few broken branches, and some sort of imprint in the soft soil beneath them. "Good job," Garrick whispered. "Oh, sorry. Good job," Garrick whispered. "This branch has only recently been broken. We can tell because it hasn't dried out yet. What animal is it?" "A deer. See how the mark splits in two down the middle?" "Yeah." Out of excitement, this reply was a little too loud. "Shh, if you're not quiet, you'll scare it away. It's close." In a crouched position, Garrick inched his way forward, with Azel right behind him. They continued for a few feet until they arrived at a small grove of trees and bushes. Quietly, Garrick pushed some branches aside. Standing there in the clearing was the most majestic beast both the father and son would ever see. The buck's antlers were large and looked almost like tree branches spreading out towards the sky. A soft green moss grew along the skyward side, with tiny flowers growing out of it. The rest of the buck's body was covered in the same type of flora. They were at a loss for words and stood there in silence for a long while, watching. As the sun began to rise up over the horizon, the buck moved. His walk was graceful, and flora grew behind him with each step. Before passing Garrick and Azel, he stopped and looked at them, with eyes void of fear, and should be devoid. And then moved on. It's a buck, right? Yep, cool. So that would be a he. When the buck had finally disappeared from view, Garrick relaxed his posture. "Let's go back, there's no hunting today," he told Azel with an unusual calmness in his voice. Azel nodded, and they left in the direction of their home. Okay, I'm gonna take this as a little section here. It's a page's worth of writing, and I think it has like the start and the beginning of a new scene. That looks like a laptop keyboard. They do, yeah. Those small form keyboards. I don't I don't want to say I'm a keyboard snob, but I'm a keyboard snob. um, I like the depression of a key. So a lot of those sort of small form keyboards are very thin, kind of chiclet keys, and when you press them, it's almost like you're touching glass. Like the new Apple MacBooks with those dreadful butterfly switch keyboards. I can't stand them. Um, because I'm so used to this yellow thing on my desk. The the way that I can sink my fingers into it means that I have this sort of muscle memory associated with just plowing through words. So when I see those small form factor keyboards, I know that if I start typing on it, it's going to slow my writing speed down quite dramatically. Um, Lucky for me, I like the sound of my keyboard, so I will keep on tapping away at it. But everyone's got a different preference. It's not like I don't want to ever give the impression that you need to have a keyboard to be a good writer. That's a pretty stupid impression, isn't it? Hey, Juxtaterrestrial. Hi, how you going? Thank you for joining me on this fine morning. We're a bit over halfway through Maiz's story that he sent over to me. So, what I want to do here is maybe less of a line-by-line edit and focus more on how it's structured. Oh, D&D was cancelled. Nice. Well, not so nice that it was cancelled. But thank you for joining me. In lieu of D&D. I'm going to talk about the structure of this page here. Both Garrick and Azel were out before dawn, with the stars were still visible in the sunny brightening sky. A crisp autumn breeze blew through trees, making the shadows tense in the distance. Was the lapping of an owl's nearby perch. So, part of the the narrator has a grandfatherly voice technique. Means that you are going to have to be careful when it comes to grounding the scene in a physical sense. I thought this was an abstract scene at first to signify the passage of time. The passagige. And it wasn't until midway through the dialogue that I then discovered that the characters, yeah, I said this before, but they are my characters too. Now that I'm thinking about them, they have a place in my mind, but they're the characters in the story. But I discovered that the characters were actually outside, so they popped into the scene, and you always want to avoid that happening. You don't want your characters to be popping into the scene, or to suddenly give them an object that they weren't holding before. It just it pops in out of nowhere. Little Papa Azel called out for his father, so at this point I'm like, wait, where are they? He was pointing a few broken branches, and it's like, oh, okay, so they're outside. What I'd do then is I'd actually describe what it's like for them to be outside. The chill of morning, washing like a cold ocean across Azel's axles. So adding a bit of detail like that tells you what the world is like, but it also informs you of where your characters are. That's the biggest thing that this front section needs. It's where are the characters. Look, Papa Azel called out for his father. That's okay. I don't mind the fact that this is back-ended in the dialogue tag. He was pointing to a few broken branches and some sort of imprint of the soft soil beneath them. But here, good job, this branch has only been recently broken. We can tell because it hasn't dried out yet. What animal is it? A deer. I think this dialogue is okay. You can break it up a little bit more with some interjections, like, what animal is it? Guy pointed to the 2 marks at the top. A deer, see how the marks are split? It's not super necessary though, but you do need to change this. Yeah, out of excitement, this reply was a little too loud. It's not grammatical, and it's back-ended very heavily, which actually may fit this. You could almost get rid of it too. Yeah, shh, if you're not quiet, you'll scare it away. It's close. In a crouch position implies that he was already in the crouch position. Oh, also, yeah, getting rid of this is the pace. Because if you have to stop and tell someone that yeah is a loud thing, it loses its impact. Whereas if you just read it, what animal is it? A deer. See how the marks split in 2 down the middle. Yeah, shh, you're not quiet. You'll scare it away. It's just implicit. And it's stronger without having to tell the reader that it's loud. This in a crouch position implies that Garrick was already crouched, so that's why I moved him beside his son and crouched low. You need to establish body positions before you make reference to them. So still low in a crouch position. Well, still low. Garrick inched his way forward with Azel right behind him. They continued for a few feet until they arrived at a small grove. I'm not great with non-metric measurements, but a few feet is a very small distance. Yards. I don't like a foot is like this, isn't it? So a few feet is like this. So if I was typing this in proper English, it would be they continued for a few minutes or a few hundred meters. Yeah, you'll have a better sense of how to talk about imperial units or passages of time. You can even replace it with time. Quietly, Gary pushed some branches aside. Now here I'd actually go to the quietly. I don't mind the fact that we don't know that they're out hunting at the very start of the scene. I think it's... you pick it up so quickly, it doesn't matter. Standing there and clinging was the most majestic beast both father and son would ever see. This is cool. I like that the narrator just steps in and assumes authority here. The buck's antlers were large and looked almost like tree branches springing up towards the sky, so women's column, so tiny flowers growing out of it. Out of it is always a clumsy way of describing it. So a soft green moss grew along the skyward side with tiny flowers blooming along the length. Growing out of it is a very literal description. Blooming along the length has a bit of a rhythm and poetry to it. So yeah, again, remember what I was saying before about taking your writing and without changing the plot, the way in which you talk about mundane things in the story will elevate the quality from like here up to here. I hope my fingers are in frame. Yes, they are. Good. So my chin and down. Good. Nice. They were at a loss for words and stood there in silence for a long while, watching. As the sun began to rise up over the horizon, the buck moved. His walk was graceful. and Flora grew behind him with each step. I don't mind that this is telling me detail, that's okay. Before passing Garrick and Azel, he stopped and looked at them with eyes devoid of fear. Drag this out for a beat, and then moved on. So, stretch it, make it a bit more impactful. When the bucket finally disappeared from view, you can just say disappeared. Garrick relaxed his posture. You can say a long string of breath, and it would imply that he's relaxed his posture is too much of a literal he is relaxed. Breathed out a long string of breath. It's also not good, but it has the added advantage of it being implied of how he's feeling using body language. You're on the right track with relax his posture, just don't declare it, demonstrate it instead. Nice. With my little covert hand signals. Do you reckon air would work better? Breathe out a long string of air. Ah, yes, really good spotting, because I can't repeat breathed and breath. That's too clunky. Yeah, that's a really good suggestion. Breathed out a long string of air. Let's go back. There's no hunting today, he told Azel with an unusual calmness in his voice. With an unusual calmness to his voice, he murmured, he spoke. I always say this, but be careful of back-ending dialogue, because oftentimes it's not as strong. There's lots of reasons why you want to move dialogue tags from the back to the front. And one of the best demonstrations is something like this, is where you want to prime the reader for receiving the words in a specific way before the words come out. Because otherwise, let's go back, there's no hunting today. Could be like 10 different ways of saying that, and you only know what Garrick said after he said it from how you describe it. Don't do that to your reader. Your reader will get confused if you do that too much, because they'll constantly be reading things and going, how is he saying this? Oh, he's saying it this way. Do it this way instead. With an unusual calmness in his voice, he spoke. Let's go back, there's no hunting today. You know immediately what it sounds like. And it just improves the pace of it too. Like, I don't have many golden rules, but this is one of them. Always consider whether or not your dialogue tags are better at the front. Hint, they're always better at the front. Well, I mean, there are examples where if you put them at the back, they can be as strong. And some very specific circumstances where you want them at the back. Like, there was one up here where I didn't want to be put at the front, but usually with something like this, it's always better at the front. Azel nodded and they left in the direction of their home. That's fine, that's kind of the end of the scene. Oh, hey, Mick. Hi. It's a pretty silly idea to have a line telling the reader the voice was gruff, quiet, etc. after the sentence itself. Yeah, that's right, because it makes the reader retrospectively reread the sentence in their head, and it kind of crunches the flow, yeah. Yeah, exactly. And they did. They chose a voice. If you don't tell a reader what voice it's in, they'll pick one that they think is appropriate, and you don't want to counteract that opinion after it's already been formed. You want to nip it in the bud. So here I've just suggested to put it at the front. You prime the reader for a certain type of voice, they listen to it, you move on. Cool. Also, hi, thanks for joining us. It's good having people here as their stories are edited, so feel free to jump in and say what needs to be said. But we are about, I think we're about 2/3 of the way through the story. We've got one more major scene to go after the deer, and then we'll be done. So, you joined us at a good point. Let's read on. This has been fun, by the way. I love working through this. There's lots of like little things to pick up on, and I've enjoyed some of like the descriptions that I've been reading through. Hmm. Assume every line is spoken with a stereotypical Oz accent. Oh no, you'll never read literature ever again if you have to listen to an Australian telling it. Oh my god. Yeah, our accent's not good. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's awful. So I was considering doing an Australian, like a really thick one here, but I don't want to torture you with that. I'll just use my Australia light accent. By the time they arrived back at their little farmhouse, the sun had already risen high into the sky, and a bustling atmosphere surrounded their home. Azelfen had 3 brothers, two of whom, um, were current. I think this is how you use whom versus which. I'm gonna pretend I'm right. We're currently busy doing farm chores. I'll double check this. Feeding the animals and tilling the ground to refresh the soil for the next spring to come. The third and oldest brother was hooking a couple of old horses up to a cart, which had been previously loaded with several boxes of vegetables. Cheese is made from their cow's milk, and a few bags of flour, with some still stacked in a neat little pile by his feet. An older sister was hanging the laundry out to dry with Azel's younger sister, and Azel's younger sister was playing with her dolls in the kitchen while their mother was packing some food in a basket. These events played out at the beginning of every autumn as the family prepared to send their produce to the city to be sold. Garrick would take his oldest son through the mountains and over to Dewhaven, a city renowned for its variety of trade goods and from across the sea. It would be a 2-month-long journey, but only if things went well along the way. Rotundra was a vast forest which bordered their village and the mountainside behind it. Dewhaven was on the other side of the mountains, so to get there the father and son would have to cross terrain where many strange and dangerous beasts lurked. Nathan heaved the last bag of flour onto the cart as Garrick took his position in the driver's seat, with the horse's rein held tightly in one hand. In the other was a type of hat which most countrymen could be seen wearing. He plopped it onto his head. "Can I come, Nathan?" asked a disappointed Azel. He already knew what the answer would be. It was the same every year. "No, you're still too young, Scott. You'd only slow us down." "Oh, come on," he replied. "Heh. Maybe next year. You'll be a bit older and more knowledgeable in the ways of the world." The answer was the same every year, except for this. Knowing that his oldest brother thought of him as almost old enough gave the boy a little bit of hope that next year he would be able to go see that wonderful city. His mother Rachel came to stand behind him as Garrick and Nathan left on their long journey west through the forest and over the mountains beyond them. As he watched their cart disappear behind the trees, he couldn't help but wonder, what was that magnificent beast that stared at them with big, clear eyes? Excuse me. The last section here is more or less arriving back with the family, and we get quite long block descriptions of here's the house, here's everyone in the house, here's where they're going, here's the target, here's the forest they're going to have to go through. Am I old enough to go? No. Okay, maybe next year. And then they kind of move out. So the story pushes itself out. How can we make this a bit less like an info dump? The telling a story in this way is usually not advisable because your reader just has to absorb a lot of information all at once that they don't have much of an emotional connection to. There's Azel and Garrick, which is the absolute center of this story. And this is coming from the back of quite a special scene where we've had the buck with the beautiful antlers. So after this, it's like, okay, we're back at the home. There's flour everywhere. You have to refresh the soil every year. Here's a collection of brothers and sisters. Nothing particularly unique about them. Except one of them is going with Dad away on an adventure through the forest into Dewhaven. Dewhaven is like this. So there's a lot of told detail, but I'm wondering how we can frame this. So usually a scene like this would be told through like a singular event, like they come home and then they'd be loading up the barrels onto the cart, and the conversation would take place. Can I come? And then they would move off, and then the narrator would make some sort of statement about where it is that they're going. This is kind of a little bit out of order, and the elements here are maybe not so easily stacked together. Just like the political situation. Oh no. Yeah. Don't judge us too much, okay? Oh, I actually like the Aussie and NZ accents. Oh, nice. I'm glad you do. try living with them. No, I don't hate them either. Just some of them are a bit brash, and but other times they're quite nice. The accents. So I'm actually going to suggest to Maiz something that I've never. I want an accent, lol. What's your accent, Sheila? I suppose I should ask where you're from first and foremost. I'm going to suggest something to Maiz here that I've never really suggested before, but it's to it's to have a think about how the narrator is talking about the story. Your story can go one of two ways, and I'm actually not going to do too much line editing here. I don't want to touch this too much, partly because there are sections here where it's like some of the dialogue is he pleaded, blah, blah, blah. Like you can put it at the front, etc., etc. You know how to clean it up. What I want to talk about is you have a decision to make about how your story functions. You can decide for yourself that your story wants to be a slightly more modern traditional fantasy. And by that I mean the kind of fantasy that's told in quite a typical modern fashion. You show a lot of detail, you frame scenes around motion events like people loading stuff onto carts and saying goodbye to each other, and then spin the implication around it. You can do it that way, and I've sort of been pushing you a little bit to write that way, just with kind of how I've chosen to edit things. But there's another thing that you can do that maybe you'd like to consider, and I can't make this decision for you, but I'll be there to guide you if you want to try this. I'll go either way. You may want to consider that this is a story that the narrator has a firm control over. And I haven't read too many stories like this recently. Where a narrator has a real presence, and their narration is actually classical narration. It's, let me tell you a story about Garrick and the boy Azel. Here they're doing this, and now they're in the forest and they're doing this, and this is what they're going to be doing. Part of the reason why I think that would be a better way for you to write this story is because you're kind of already doing it. These events played out at the beginning of every autumn as the family prepared to send their produce to the city to be sold. Garrick would do this, here's Dewhaven, city renowned for its goods, etc., etc. So usually what I suggest is to not write like this. I go, okay, your narrator is info dumping information to your reader. Your reader's going to get a bit fractious and a little bit bored if they just have to sit through, like, list descriptions of, here's a city, here's what it's like, here's what it's famous for. But there is a way that your narrator can actually make this engaging, and it's if your narrator has a stronger control of the narrative flow. Which would mean that your story would take on a bit more of a classic feel, I guess. And I'm not really sure how to suggest going about writing something like that, because I haven't really read too much that's like that. But I sort of get the feeling that that's what you're going for. Your narrator in this story isn't there just to throw information at you. Your narrator seems to be there to have their voice imbued within the story. So usually I'd suggest reworking sections like this so that they read in a more character grounded, motion oriented scene where the camera follows the characters around, they interact, characters depart, and the narrator may drop a line, not a sentence, but like a line or a beat about where they're off to. For your story, maybe you'd like to try and work at having the narrator control events so that it reads more like a classic fable or grand narrative. So if you're to do that, have a think about your narrative voice. Imagine a wizened old man, or woman, a wizard old woman, person, narrating the events as though it's an actual story. That will help frame sections like this, where usually so for example, these events played out at the beginning of every autumn as the family prepared to send their produce to the city to be sold. Becomes through many cold winters this family had endured to rise into the new world of autumn. Oh, sorry, summers. That doesn't work then. After repeated years of plentiful harvests, every year the same. So something like this. After plentiful harvests always came the haul, the family's order and ritual for survival. Every year the same. Through the mountains and on to Devonport, they would cart their wares. To the city, paved with streets of pearl, or so young Azel thought. So, this type of narration here is it tells you detail, right? It's got very little room for showing you things, but you can switch between having this grandfatherly narration at the top, and then with scenes where stuff actually happens, you push the camera down and you talk more about what it's like to be on the ground, seeing this buck, in this scene, for instance. And then you take the camera up, and you see the world in the bigger picture. I think that would maybe work well for the story, and something that that May should have a think about. When I say you, I mean Maiz. That's a long haul. It is a bit, yeah. I think. Oh well, the comment definitely is. But I think I wanted to be quite descriptive in what it was that I think would be good for Maiz to aim for, because sure, like I could. I think maybe it could be disappointedly. I suggest against either actually. I'll show you why. I think it can be stronger. Here's what happens when you get rid of it. Oops, excuse me. Asked a disappointed Azel asked disappointedly. Turning this into an adverb is maybe more grammatically correct. But I think the whole idea of it needs to be rethought of as well. If you have to, if you're putting character information or voice or implication into a dialogue tag, have a think about whether or not it would be stronger actually making it into like a bit of motion. With only a fraction of hope, Azel tugged at his brother's tunic and asked, "Quiet, can I come, Nathan?" And this kind of encompasses that sense of disappointment. He already knew what the answer would be. It was the same every year. So this tells you that the disappointment is running through Azel. But we don't say, asked Azel disappointedly, and asked a disappointed Azel. So what we've done here is we've reframed the whole thing so that it's implicit that the disappointment is here. It runs through the whole scene. And you might be asking yourself, well, why is that better? Like, why can't we just say it outright? And that comes back to the point of demonstrating things about your story versus telling the reader. With the exception of me, who is very stupid, readers are very smart. And when they read lots of stories, they get very good at picking up information implicitly about characters by how they act, what they say, how they say it, but not because the narrator tells them, because of the context of the scene. With only a fraction of hope, Azel tugged at his brother's tunic and asked, "Quiet, can I come, Nathan?" Now, this together works really well because the disappointment's just there in the context, and your reader feels better intuitively knowing that they've picked up on that without having the narrator go, "Azel is sad, Azel is disappointed, he is this, he is that." The less that you do that within your story, where you bludgeon your reader with details, the more it's actually present in the world of the story. I think that's stronger. Much, much stronger. What are you, TTLICC? What's... I've never seen that one before. Pepega. Has anyone ever made like a Pepe the Frog, Peppa Pig, and call it Pepe Pig? I regret saying that out loud. Anyway, I don't like Peppa the Pig. I mean, I don't like Pepe either, but I don't like Peppa Pig. On the scale of minions to... What's on the other end of the minion scale? 0. Okay, so we've got 0 on one hand, and we've got minions as the absolute embodiment of my hatred. Peppa Pig is up there, pushing minions. Pepe is pretty low, like... different reasons, I guess. Peppa Pig has eyes on the same side of her face. It's not right. It's not a good thing that Peppa Pig is. I'm looking at Peppa Pig right now. I'm not going to look at Peppa Pig anymore. I've talked to quite enough about Peppa Pig. So, in some sense, I feel like I'm done. I don't want to go too much more over this in a line by line sense, because I feel like I want Maiz to have to think about how the story wants to be told and with what kind of voice. I might just reread this last section though. The answer was the same every year except for this. Knowing that his oldest brother thought of him as almost old enough, it should be a colon. Gave the boy a little bit of hope that next year he would be able to go see that wonderful city. The launch heading west. As he watched their car disappear behind the trees, he couldn't help but wonder what was it, maybe it was a beast. So I like here that you've brought it back to the beast, but the divide between coming home and starting this farmhouse scene is quite strong. So in my mind, this could almost be like a new time division like you've done before. Remember, it's here. There's a time division here, as you signify with like a line. Because goes to sleep, wake up, and end of the Dia scene. There's also a question of maybe you'd also like to think about why. Maybe have a think about why Garrick chose Azel for the hunt and not one of the other brothers. Also consider, like, is this like a farewell gift? Before the dad goes away. The dad is away, right? Garrick and Nathan, yeah. That might make it a bit easier to justify why this scene exists back to back with the fact that Garrick comes home and then immediately leaves. Logistically, that might not make sense. Just in terms of the fact that he has to prepare everything with the other brothers before he goes, it might make more sense to frame this deer scene, the buck scene, as like a gift, knowing that Azel won't be seeing his father for a while, so this is like a farewell gift, and it's a pretty magical moment. Also, I didn't get the sense in this section of a story here. Also consider that this is the last night that father and son share until father comes home many months later. Is there any emotion? Well, there should be. I'd imagine Azel, not Axel. I'd imagine Azel would be quite sad to see his father go. So a couple of things, I think, just wrapping this all together. Have a think about how Azel appreciates his father's presence in scenes 1 and scene 2, the bedtime scene and the buck scene, in full knowledge of the fact that Azel knows that his father's going. Also have to think about how the the ring fits into this. I'm still not sure how the magic in this opening paragraph fits in with everything else. Like there's the deer, the buck, and there's the magic creatures in the ring, but it hasn't really come together in any way. Azel's, it could be an overactive imagination, or it could be something about the world, but we haven't quite got a sense of how it all feeds together. And I mean, it's only 1,200 words with my 300 put in there, but um, it doesn't feel unified right now. That's okay. It doesn't need to be at the start of the story, but I kind of don't know where it's going or what kind of story to expect. There's a bit of magic. There's some interesting things that we've got going on. But the crux of it is that a father has left his son on a trade expedition that they do every year. They saw a magical buck in the forest before then, and then they had this scene at the start. There's magic here, but I don't know how it's connected yet. And I think that at the start of a story, it'd be really good to have something a bit clearer running through the spine of the narrative. But I don't know what that could be. I'll let Miak have a think about it. I'm sorry, Maiz. I think Maiz is Miak. I'm pretty sure it's the same user behind the screen name, unless I have a Maiz and a Miak who both follow me. Hmm. So do you always put commas before writing as something? Yeah, I'd like an example too. Do you always put commas before writing as something? Miak is not Maiz. Really? Miak, are you still here? if so, say hi. Tell me that you're not Maiz. Oh my god, you're totally right. Yep, no, I see it. I have a Maiz and a Miak. Oh, I confused them in my head. My apologies to Miak here. Sorry, I didn't put two and two together then. So this isn't your story. This is Maiz's story, and oh, that's right. I remember I've done one of your stories in the past, Miak, but just not this one. This is Maiz. I'm sorry to Maiz for confusing Maiz with someone else. This is why you shouldn't trust anything I say that isn't specifically related to line edits. Like, I can go through a story and recommend what I hope is decent suggestions, but when it comes to remembering basic names of my followers, no, absolutely not. TTLACC, who's this? Who is everyone? For example, I read a book, I don't remember the name, Sally is. She showered as if she stood. Okay. I've also got like an idea here as right. So as the river meets the sea as x as y, that might be a bit of a weird example here. It's because I see is the Discord list. Yeah, that's I saw the Discord list too. I think just as I was looking through it, then I thought, oh no, I've made a grand mistake. I'm okay at smashing proteins too. That's my other miscellaneous strength. So to answer the question, she showered as if she stood under a drizzle of rain. Or under a drizzle of rain, but under. She showered as if she stood under a drizzle of rain. if you put the comma there, it separates it out into its own phrase. She showered as if her life depended on it. Is an idiom, as if her life depended on it. Um, she showered as though she had never showered in her life before. She showered as if she stood under a drizzle of rain. That's a bit of a fragment, that one. You could probably use it in specific circumstances like this, but I don't think comma as is a very common thing. Yeah, right. I'm not all that crash hot with my grammar in terms of dependent and independent clauses, but I think I agree with Sheila here in terms of the as. She showered as though a year's worth of mud had collected on her body, for instance. But if you have a thing like this, as the river meets the sea, as X does Y, so too does this. But this is different because these are parts of phrases that go up to make a sentence. So that's a little different. Would she showered as if under the rain without a comma be also grammatically correct? She showered as if under the rain would imply that she's in a situation in which rain is falling on her and it is like she's having a shower. It's a bit of a funny thing. Would she showered as if under the rain? It showered as though she was under. It rained as though. Yeah, so we can flip it round. It rained so much that it rained so much that here's the backward implication of this sentence. She showered as if under the rain would be, it rained so much that it would be as if she were taking a shower. English is weird. So, in other words, like, imagine that that's not there. This little thing that I'm highlighting right now. So much that it would be. Just get rid of that. It rained as if she were taking a shower. Is clunky, and I don't like it. I think there are better ways to describe this, but this is the implication of a sentence. It doesn't need a comma. So I have a story 20 pages long and I'm still adding more. Ooh! Yeah, of course. Send it over on Discord. You've popped into the chat, but just send me a message over Discord and I'll take a look at it. I'll read through like a page and get a handle on it. But yeah, I can schedule you in for a stream. I stream once a week, the stories once a week, so this time every Sunday. So yeah, if you're happy to share it, I'd be happy to edit it. As long as you're happy with me typing with my loud keyboard. Cool, I think we're done. Thanks to Maiz for sending this through. Thank you to Miak for being patient while I called Miak Maiz. No, it is Sunday my time. It is 9 AM. In your part of the world, it is Saturday. I think a lot of my some of my followers are from the Northern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere. So I think it's probably like crazy late at night for you, like 3 AM or something. But yeah, I'm in Australia. It is beautiful sunshine along my wall. It is now 11 AM Sunday, my time. Oh, 4 PM. I went into Google time in Australia. Yep. That'll also do it. 4 PM, cool. If I stream at night, it's crazy early in the morning for other people. That's right, yep. Time zones are confusing. Very confusing. And 7 PM for Juxta. So, sun rises in the east, sets in the west. Juxta's on the east coast? Sheila's in Washington State. So that makes sense, that's west coast. Cool. Nailed it. Yes. Cool. Good. I think we're done here. Yeah. yeah, we can continue chatting in Discord. But yeah, send me your story, Sheila, and we can work through it next Sunday. Good. All right, thanks for joining me, everyone. It's been nice to get back into the editing. It's been a little while since I've actually done a story, hasn't it? Yeah, this has been good. You can DM me if you want, unless you want other people to have a look at it too. All of us are writers or writing enthusiasts, so we can give you some collective advice, or if you just wanted to DM me, yeah, totally up to you. Alright, cool. Well, we'll see you guys probably next week then. Oh, actually, yeah, I'll be streaming some Hollow Knight this week as well. Maybe not twice, maybe just once. So join me midweek for that. And have a good Saturday night, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, wherever you are. We'll catch you next time.